Welcome to Different Thinking for Different Times. I'm Steve Lentini, and I'm your host. So the small-minded thinking, the acorn brain, the reactive brain, is active in everyone. It's active in me every day. I notice some of the thoughts that my little brain, the small-minded thinker, the acorn brain, as I call it, wants to enroll me in. And it's interesting how it applies to almost everything. It can apply at home when the dogs are acting up, or I notice if there's something that gets me activated that my wife might do. My brain wants to enroll me in reacting, and that's often the automatic thought. And the challenge with the automatic thought is it's coming from small-minded thinking. And if we can't learn to rise above that, like Dr. Rao says in his book, Are You Ready to Succeed? If we don't work on developing a level of thinking above our thinking, then we can't advance. What we focus on in life expands. Physicists have said that thoughts are things. There's an energy. And if we follow up on a negative, small-minded thought, what could the outcome be? Think about that. Think of your life as right now as being the sum total of all your words, your thoughts, words, and actions. And if you want to have a life that's different, if you want to have a future that's unlike the past, one has to begin investigating their thoughts, their words, and actions. After all, that's what created your life up until now. So small-minded thinking, courses in politics, we get to see it, especially today and for the last 20 years. Back and forth, partisanship. Who knows what the truth is, because either side would prefer you didn't know it. And then now you also have people that are afraid to speak up because one side wants everybody to think the same way, and maybe both sides want everybody to think the same way. Well, if you don't think my way, then you're wrong. And that's small-minded, acorn brain thinking. And it's the same about my religion's right, my politics are right, my boss is wrong. Any kind of thinking that's small-minded, my neighbor's wrong. That's what we're here to do. Overcome all of those small-minded thoughts and expand into the limitless. We live in a miracle. We live in something limitless, and to mirror that by breaking through our limited, small-minded thinking. I mean, it can be in traffic, it can be shopping, it can be waiting in a line. Anything we don't like, in quotes, I use that. Anything I don't like, I want to react against it. If I listen to my acorn brain, my small-minded thinker. When I breathe and expand into the limitless possibility, I can ask myself, is this really true? Does this really need a response from me? Am I going to make a difference? What good will it do is a great question. What good will it do? I was 13 before Let me take that back. I was 43 before I realized my father had been missing for 5 years, when a good portion of the family had already been born. 3 brothers and a sister. There was a huge gap. 19 years, 18 years, 17 years, 14 years between the first 4 and my twin brother and I. And then David was born. He was 6 years older. And then Stanley and I, my twin brother. So he was dead 13 years. That's where 13 came up. He was dead 13 years before I learned that he had been missing for 5 years, and that was the reason for the gap. And I had asked my mother at a lunch. I would have lunch with her every Tuesday and say, "So, Ma, what's the reason for the gap in the ages of all the children, our children, my brothers and sister?" And she said very casually, as she was taking a bite of a ham sandwich, "Oh, your father was missing for 5 years." I was like, "What?" I said, "How come you never said anything?" She said, "Well, what good would it do?" Fascinating lesson, right? Because it would have made Dad wrong. She could have screamed and yelled about it every time she got mad. And David, Stanley, and I never knew. I asked my older brothers and sisters, like, how come you never said anything? I think Seb was 8 or 9. Lorraine, that would make Lorraine 7 or 8. Frank, 5 or 6. And Bob, I understood, because that would have made him 2. And I said, how come Seb, I didn't meet him, by the way, until he was 29 and I was 10, because he went in the service when I was born. And he came to the house all in his Air Force uniform. And I said, Seb, how come you couldn't have said one time, "Hey, Dad, pass the green beans"? And where were you those 5 years, by the way? I mean, we would have had a much more real, authentic family existence that way. A family group would have been, because it would have been a discussion about what happened, and then forgiveness. And Mom could have said, what good would it have done a lot earlier? And Seb said the same thing. We just didn't talk about it. Mom said, what good would it do? Now, that also led to an environment of sweeping things under the rug. It really wasn't authentic. But still, the point of what good will it do has stuck with me. And it fits really nicely with my message and the message that I'm learning for myself, because I'm noticing how small-minded my thinking can be in so many ways. And the invitation in life is to overcome it. If you believe that, I don't want to convince you of it. I'm telling you, it's made a difference in my life. Instead of having a story about others, whether in relationship or work or at the supermarket or wherever I go, I breathe and relax into what good would it do? What's expanded thinking? What's limitless thinking? What's infinite thinking, as opposed to small-minded, finite, tight, really dumb thinking? But if I don't question my own thinking, who will? And so the thing to do is to remember that we live in the moment. As I said, November 13th, when I was doing my seminar, I didn't wake up that day thinking maybe I'll be in the hospital in intensive care. I had a past, I had a future. One second I was fine. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, I needed an ambulance. I remember being grateful and relaxing into what was coming, because I had been studying the possibilities of expanded thinking and working on overcoming my acorn brain. And I got to the hospital, immediately put in an intensive care, and 5 days later, I flatlined. And the great gift was I was on the other side. I was part of the infinite. Immediately, without a body, I still had a consciousness, which I noted. It was just a knowing that I was now one with everything and nothing. So fascinating. One with everything and nothing. Then there was a life review, only the good I had done. And the significant thing there was it went from the knowing to the life review to the question after that I'll tell you about in a second, that I was asked. And I couldn't tie each scene together till I got back in my body. So where I was in the infinite, there was no past or future, which is something Einstein and other physicists have said. So one with everything and nothing, pure consciousness, one with the infinite, no body, then a life review, and only the lives I had touched, only the good I had done. And then I was asked a question. Again, pure consciousness, stay or go. And my own consciousness responded immediately with thy will be done. It didn't matter. I was finally totally in the moment, and I was 50 years old, and I was right back in the hospital room. And I learned later through medical records that what it said was couldn't rule out the possibility of a anterior myocardial infarction. And the reason that was on the medical record, that was the second hospital that I went to 5.5 weeks later. It wasn't the first hospital. Those records, I still have had trouble locating them. I haven't found them. The Waltham Hospital in Massachusetts went out of business. So I'm not sure who has those records. And I've been working with Massachusetts to find them. But it was interesting that when I went to Brigham and Women's, 5.5 weeks later, the first thing in my medical report says, cannot rule out possible myocardial infarction, anterior myocardial infarction, which I knew explained too that I was on the other side. I knew I had gone through that because, in fact, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks later, I did mention to the two friends that were with me at that moment, and in fact, were often with me. I said to them, hey, there was a day I was in and out of consciousness. I was with you guys, and then there was a moment, and they both said, oh, that was Monday, November 18th at around 2 o'clock. I said, how do you know? They said, oh, the nurses and doctors came running in. Your vitals had crashed. The alarms were going off, and they said to us, out. This is it. Call his family. So our journey here is to overcome small-minded thinking. And despite what's going on in the outer world, we're being invited, especially today with all the events, to let go. The whole world is getting a lesson in letting go, detach from outcomes. I'd been teaching it for years in my sales training, directing salespeople to help people buy. Help them choose the right thing, whether it's you or not. And it's very much detaching from outcomes, meaning we're not general managers of the universe. We don't have control of outcomes. We only have control of the energy we put out into the world. And it's much better. And you have to prove this to yourself, but it's much better when you take some time to think about what would a limitless possibility thinker do here? What would the infinite do here? If you want to say God, what would God do here? You want to say the divine or the goddess, it doesn't matter what you call it. It had no name, as Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching. You cannot name that which has no name. So enjoy the journey. Be in the now. Have fun knowing that whatever comes across your plate in the now is the divine. If it doesn't fit your picture and you want to rail against it, breathe and think, as Eckhart Tolle says, oh, this must be the plan. Because in the now is where the divine was. It was the now on steroids, I call it. And so that means you're resisting a gift because you're judging it as bugging you, the person's bugging you, the situation's bugging you, when actually look for the gift. You're the creator of your experience. You're the master of circumstance, unless you want to be the victim of things and have a story and tell people, hey, look what happened to me. Oh, it was awful. Listen to this. Instead, you could say, wow, here's something I learned that was very uncomfortable in the beginning. Or here's a person who I didn't like, who I thought was really arrogant and obnoxious. And I stopped and thought, wait a minute, where am I being obnoxious? Or where have I been arrogant and obnoxious? That's the gift in it. You're getting to see what it looks like when you are that way. And if you're honest, you'll find somewhere with someone or in some situation, you've been like that. So that's an example of how to rise above that small-minded thinking. And that's different thinking for different times. If you'd like to be interviewed on the podcast, email me, steve@stevelentini.com, steve@stevelentini.com. I'm glad to have you on, and we'll have a great discussion about it. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter. I welcome it all. Thank you so much.